Well, every year here at REACHRIGHT, we come up with a list of some of the most important church statistics of the year, and then we boil it down to our 6 favorite. And in this conversation, Ian and I are going to share those top 6 church statistics for 2025. Let's do this. Well, hey guys, I'm Thomas.
And I'm Ian.
And today we are talking about church statistics, specifically new ones that we have discovered in the year 2025. I think it should be a good conversation. This is an annual episode that we do of the Reach Right podcast. For those of you that are longtime listeners and followers, you'll know that since like 2017, we've been publishing a blog post about the top church statistics of the year. Always super fun to dig into that. And then what you and I, Ian, do is each year we come up with our top 3 that stand out the most to us this year. Each year they're pretty different because these stats tend to be somewhat fluid. But you and I, not knowing the other person's statistic, will kind of share the stat that we found most compelling, 3 that we found most compelling this year. So we're going to dig into that and talk a little bit more about church statistics today. So should be a fun conversation.
Always fun, and we promise that we don't really know what the other chose. I do feel like, if memory serves me correctly, Thomas, we usually kind of happen to not choose the same ones. I don't know. We'll see if that happens.
Never had the same ones. So we'll see if
we've had one or something, but usually it's just different ones stand out. So we'll see what happens.
Could be the year this year. So I always enjoy this. This is probably one of my favorite episodes of the year, just because the statistic stuff, I think it's really fun for me. We create this content because a lot of you tell us that it's something that's really been helpful to you. And we find that a lot of people are linking to our content and finding it super useful. So if it is helpful to you, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. We have all kinds of other content we put out here, and thanks for being a part of the Reach Right family. So, Ian, you want to kick it off first? Share the first one?
I will. My first one that I chose was statistic number 4 here. So, and it is churches are still recovering from pre-pandemic attendance losses. Now, that's not shocking necessarily. I still hear that in now 2020, at the end of 2024, and now at the beginning of 2025. We know that for the most churches, for the overwhelming majority of most churches, they still haven't returned to full, operating attendance like they were. But here's what I guess stuck out to me. The reason I chose this is that for a while we were hearing that churches were only at 65% of their pre-pandemic attendance, and now they're at 85%. So I found this to be encouraging. So that's why I chose it. And it sounds like, first of all, we commend, and not only are we in ministry and are made up of a team of pastors and ministry leaders here doing work at our local churches, we commend the work of pastors and ministry leaders across the country because coming back and combating the effects of the pandemic has not been easy. And so we do commend churches for putting in hard work, and I think that's what is shown off. So I shared this just on just the fact that it's improved. So now still work to be done, and again, I think we need to look at this differently. I don't think that every church should just be thinking, oh goodness, we have to be at that number we were in 2019. But obviously it makes sense to try to get that momentum and growth back up and running. So, and so that statistic was encouraging.
Can I ask you, I don't know if you're privy, probably not, to like all the details of your attendance numbers at your church. Did you guys, and I don't, like, you probably have different number of services and all those things that you used to have. Where are you guys at in your kind of...
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because we are one of the churches that saw more growth post-pandemic, during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So I don't know our exact percentage, but I do think that it's close to probably 20% above where we were. Now, there are factors to know about this. As we've shared, I'm a part of a very large church in the Austin area. It's a multi-campus church. We also have seen, since the pandemic, many people move to the Austin area. Also, I will say, in our church's backyard, as you visited here this last year, Thomas, you saw the growth of how many I can't even count how many apartment complexes, condos, new neighborhoods, subdivisions. Actually, our church sold a portion of our property to an apartment builder. So we have people that simply walk from their apartment to church on
one way
Sunday.
to grow. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's right. So there are different factors, but I would say we were a minority compared to most churches in the U.S.
Yeah. So my church, we were a 2-service church before the pandemic, and we are a 1-service church now.
Yeah.
I would say we probably averaged about 450 pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And we're at about 250 now in typical attendance. Hawaii is another anomaly on the opposite end, where we were forced to not meet for a full 18 months. Just because of their super aggressive policies on shutdowns and visits and masking and all those kinds of things that happen there. They're just outside of our control. So we, for literally, actually, we didn't actually have we didn't meet at all for 18 months, and then we didn't meet in our normal space. We had to rent a movie theater for an additional year on top of that until we finally got to get back into our original space. So
different
all
scenario.
kinds of things stacked against us.
Yeah.
So I will say on the positive side that it depends on how you measure. And I don't think most churches should measure this as the main measurement of health. It's a measurement of health, but our giving as a church is above where it was in 2019. So part of that is inflation and some of those kinds of things. So people, people are getting paid more, perhaps, that kind of stuff. But there's victories there. We're seeing more people give their life to Jesus. So we're counting more baptisms and more decisions for Jesus than we did in 2019. So I'm not really ready to say that we are a smaller church, certainly in Sunday attendance. But when it comes to other metrics of overall health, commitment, discipleship, I think there's a lot of things that are going well. So for what it's worth, I think that was interesting. But I have seen that we have been growing, and we're expecting to see some traction and get up to maybe that 80% of recovery number. It's hard to even think of that in those terms anymore. I want to put the pandemic way behind us, right? But here we are. We're still talking.
By the way,
it.
that statistic was from Lifeway Research, which is definitely a good, credible source. So just to mention that. So
yeah, good stuff. Yeah. All right, next one. Mine is from Zippia, which I hadn't heard of, but they're a job recruiting board. So this is about pastoral jobs. And they found that the average age of a pastor in the United States is 51 years old.
I almost chose that one, but I did not.
Yeah. So to me, that was just kind of I feel like I hear this statistic and things like it all the time. And I already know that there has been this dramatic shift in the age of pastors. Because you look at the workforce, which is people from 18 to 65, let's call it, kind of that typical, for pastors to be 14 years from the top end and so far from the bottom end of that range, it really is crazy. Now, so by that standard, Ian, you and I would be on the younger half of pastors, right? So which is so weird for someone like you, as gray and everything as you are there.
That's right. For someone like me, only a year older than you, Thomas. Yes, that's fine. Yes.
Right. Well, just different life phases, I guess you would say. So late 40s, early 40s.
For our REACHRIGHT audience, I get picked on for being the oldest team member at REACHRIGHT at 46. So there you go.
But hey, if you were a pastor, you'd be a young whippersnapper again.
There you go.
It's something
there you go. There you go.
So I say all this, church, we have a problem. This is not an ageist thing. I'm all for people pastoring. I don't think you become disqualified from being a pastor at a certain age, but there is definitely, I don't have the numbers in front of me on this side of it, but there's definitely a trend where pastors are getting older and older and older. And it's no coincidence to me that it seems like it's harder and harder for us to be reaching younger generations because people generally go to churches where pastors are within 5 years of them at age. A church plant, for instance, generally they're going to be best at reaching people that are pretty similar to the lead pastor in their average age. So it is surprising to me that we've seen this, although I don't know if surprising is the right word, but I think it's something we have to correct. That's something that's kind of like my mission right now. I'm an executive pastor at my church. Our lead pastor is definitely younger. This number, he's a couple years younger than me. I am going to be very intentional on staffing our church
Yep.
younger and younger and younger, and making
Yep.
sure that we're able to do that. Because 5 years from now, or maybe 5 years for you, I guess you're over that 51 age. I
Yeah.
guess 5 years from now. These numbers are fluid, right? So, but you have to be
Yep.
intentional about recruiting the next generation.
Yeah.
That's something that I am very cognizant of. That's a word that God's put on my heart for
Yep.
this next season. So just something that kind of caught my attention, this one.
Well, especially since we know that if you look at all the other statistics out there that we won't dig into, the younger you get with each generation, the less church attendance there is per each generation. And it's something I'll lastly say, my church has also been very intentional to hire younger church leadership, have younger people on staff, and it's helped us most certainly reach those 20-somethings and even under. Definitely for sure. So, well, good. Next one I chose is just Christianity declining within America. And so this would be, I guess, number 5 on our list. This was more depressing, I guess, just that I unfortunately can't say it surprised me, but it just kind of stood out as depressing. But the predicted decline in Americans identifying as Christian it's falling below 50%. So really this points to a shift in beliefs, that just within the landscape of our country. And so it's, now with that comes opportunity. There's plenty of people to be reached for Christianity and for following Jesus. So, but yeah, kind of a depressing stat, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything surprising about that. I think
Not
if you
surprising.
just kind of look at the culture like that, that's kind of what we see
Right.
happening. That it is,
Yep.
we are on the decline. I think that there is a lot of evidence that encourages me that when it becomes less the status quo of a culture, that kind of the fervency, I guess you'd say, the fervor of the faithful, it tends to go up. So you look at places where people are persecuted for their faith, that there tends to be a very passionate core of people. And I think my best guess as to that statistic is that we've shifted as a culture. Like 30 years ago, there was a great social benefit to being a follower of Jesus, right? To say that I'm a Christian, I go to church, that would benefit you socially. You could get better jobs, more connections, you build relationships, you're an upstanding member of your community. Now, I think that while there are certainly still benefits, I think they're less obvious to people. And in some ways, being a born-again Christian costs you something socially, especially when you get into some high society areas, New York City, Silicon Valley, these kinds of places, where to be a Christian is, looked down upon and not something that you want to be seen as. And so there's not really the same social benefit they're used to. So what I think is happening is that it's removing a lot of those people from the ranks that are people that would just claim Christianity but not be really living it out. When you think about the people that are declining. But I feel like, and maybe this is wrong, I don't have any evidence on this here, but it feels to me like the number of people that are born again, Bible believing, live their life for Jesus kinds of Christians, that number feels somewhat constant to me, but I could be wrong about that too. So,
that's good.
Yeah. So, all right, my next one is only 10 to 15% of average congregation tithes regularly. On average, of a congregation tithes regularly. So,
I knew you were going to choose a tithing one.
Of course.
I know.
This
You
is
love
who
it.
I am, buddy.
I know.
I'm an executive pastor at a church.
Numbers guy.
Numbers guy. Well, this is all numbers. It's statistics.
And you love
So,
the subject of tithing. So you've preached on
do.
it many times. So
other than saying yes to Jesus and my wife and having kids, there's been few things that have changed my life more than getting that area of my life in order.
well said. Well said.
When you and I met, I was a tipper of God, and then I became a tither of God shortly after you and I met, and it's totally changed everything.
You
about
helped
my
me
life.
understand where I was tipping, and I didn't think I was. So yeah.
Not surprising. I don't think
Yeah.
10 to 15%. I know what church finances look like.
Yeah.
I am intimately involved with this. I'm prepping right now for our church's annual meeting where we're going to share some of our particular church's our statistics. Disappointing at the same time, right? So, and just full disclosure, I know a lot of our audience, I'm sure, has different theology on this topic. I'm someone that believes not that tithing is necessarily a commandment, but it is a principle that is timeless and something that God still invites his children to do. It's not a commandment in that I don't believe it's a sin to not tithe, but I think that it is something that is a huge blessing that I have experienced in my life that is available to every believer, and that's something that I teach in my church. If you have a different view on tithing, if you think it's not for today, feel free to comment down below. We could have a discussion around that. We respond to all of our comments, and so feel free to do that. I guess more than anything, it didn't surprise me, but I think I'm just saddened for this fact that so many of God's children are missing out on what has been so life-changing for me, and I think would be so life-changing for them. And I want to, one of my life's missions is to help my church and the people that I have influence over embrace this. And so, I think that's something that's, I want to, it's evidence that there's room for improvement.
Well said. Well said. So no, nothing much to add to that one. My last one was that there's been substantial growth in Christian universities. This kind of surprised me. Not, didn't floor me or anything, but just that there are students that, I guess some of this data that was derived for this stat was that there are students seeking a higher just meaning for their lives, even more community. So it's not just necessarily the appeal of faith, but connection, unity, those types of reasons were kind of a indicator of why. And so, and they think that this is also because of some of the pandemic's isolating effects for the younger generation, that, this Christian appeal from these universities was appealing. So I found that to be pretty interesting. And actually what also interested me is, you probably know, last year my church launched a Christian university that we are launching, and it has tremendous momentum already. So yes.
Yeah. I have a college student and I have a senior in high school in our house. And my senior in high school is in the process of having applied to colleges. We've been looking at all kinds of schools and trying to figure out where he's going to be going next year, probably away from us, which is heartbreaking here in Hawaii to go across thousands of miles of ocean.
Send him here in the Austin, Texas area. Send him to UT, and then I can look after him, okay?
I heard UT is like the Harvard, is basically going to Harvard nowadays. It's such a good school to go to for people. So one of the schools that keeps popping up is Grand Canyon University, and I saw a stat that that's now the largest university in the country.
Wow.
And it's a Christian school out of Phoenix. It's amazing to me because like 20 years ago, I remember when I went to a little Bible college, they were like a similar size school to my little dot of a school that I went to. Yeah. So it's a liberal arts Christian school, but it is distinctly Christian in its teaching and everything. And I've heard great things about it. I have seen this trend. I feel like anecdotally, I keep running across it. I'm hearing more and more about good Christian schools. I think some of them are nonprofit, some of them are for-profit. But yeah, I think it's just kind of an interesting thing to trend. I know also that we seem to be hearing from more and more Christian universities and schools looking for our services. Yeah. Kind of crazy to see all these.
A couple of months ago. Yeah.
Right. And there's a couple in the works, I believe, too, that we've been talking about. So yeah, really cool stuff. And we love being able to help Christian schools and universities to reach more people and fulfill their mission. So fun stuff.
Absolutely.
All right. Good. My last one is weekly regular attendance is down, is at 20%. Down from 32% in the year 2000. So 25 years ago, 32% of the United States went to church weekly. Now 20% go to church weekly. So an enormous decrease in that number. And then the stat kind of continued from there, that if you change the definition of regular church attendance to monthly attendance, that 41% of the Americans say they go to church monthly. But if you make the standard weekly, that is something that is much lower. Yeah. So I think that this shows a couple of things. I think it shows the overall trend that we're talking about, that people are less likely, especially those that are like nominal. They're much less likely to be engaged with a church for the most part.
Yeah.
But I also think it shows a trend that I see at my church. You probably, I'm sure, see at a mega church like yours, is that good attendance is no longer weekly attendance.
Yeah.
Like, I think for a lot of people, good attendance is like twice a month. If you go twice a month, like you're a very faithful attender by today's standards.
Or that you're engaged in another way, you're giving, or in a small group, it's tracked a bit differently.
Sure.
We've seen that word engagement popped up over the pandemic more than anything, right?
Yeah, no, totally. But I think it's just something that still I wrestle with as a church leader in my church, is that, like, you know, we should, if good attendance is now twice a month, right? Or, you know, if, you know, even once a month is like, people consider themselves regular attenders if they're going once a month, which I think we just have different definitions. If you ask the average pastor that we serve here at REACHRIGHT, what is good church attendance? They would say, like, you know, 3 to 4 times a month, right? That's what your expectation is. You come every week to church. And I still teach that, right? I teach our people at our church, come every week, make it part of your life. It's healthy for you. It's good. But in general, people do not see the world that way. And so there's a disconnect. I think that's not kind of missing each other on this. And I think that I still am going to teach until I die that, like, being a regular part of a worship experience with your body of Christ is something that's valuable to you.
I agree.
You should try to make it part of what you do every week. I teach my kids that. I'm going to teach my grandkids that if I can. That's my heart. But I think we just have to deal with the reality at the same time, that that's not what the world sees. And so we have to teach to that. I think that's something, kind of raising our standard as church leaders to be able to teach and know that we're preaching from a point of having to change minds, not preaching to the choir, as it were, anymore on this, because people see things the opposite way in this. So I thought that it was interesting.
I did too, yeah. And we've been seeing statistics like that for, I'd say a lot of those have popped up since the pandemic, even though that was being, you know, tracked and there was some decline before then. I think that, the pandemic really kind of fleshed that out, if you will, that unfortunate reality, in my opinion, too. But it's something we got to work through. And there's still hope in that. There's still, again, that word engagement in churches, seeking to keep people engaged as much as possible in different areas, in hopes, and I'm with you, not old school, it's biblical too, that people would be fellowshipping together physically, and so more often. So
yeah, good stuff. So
we
but what's
again
it out
did
to
not choose. I just got to say, we again not planned. Just, I guess, different brains, different things stand out.
Thank the Lord that we are different in that way. So kind of old and young, if you will.
That's right.
So that
there you
kind
go.
I hope this has been good for you guys too. We always love doing this. If this episode is helpful for you too, we'd love it if you would leave a comment. Take a look at the blog post. We have all those stats listed out there, some new ones, and it's always something that's super useful. We want to be a resource to churches like yours on that. If there's one that stood out to you, let us know down in the comments. Thanks, guys, for being a part of the REACHRIGHT family, and we'll see you next time.
See you.